Was this my life? Was this the picture-perfect suburban existence I'd carefully curated, or had it always been a fragile illusion, waiting for a single thread to unravel and expose the rot beneath? From the outside, our house on Willow Creek Lane in Oakwood, Ohio, was the epitome of comfortable stability. Manicured lawn, 2 cars in the driveway, a basketball hoop tilted slightly over the garage. Inside, it was warm, filled with the scent of whatever I'd baked. Usually something healthy, but with a secret dollop of butter, the murmur of the TV, and the occasional burst of Lily's teenage laughter from upstairs. I was Sarah. 42 years old, wife to David, 43, mother to Lily, 16. My life revolved around the familiar rhythm of school runs, PTA meetings. I was the secretary, naturally. My part-time work as a freelance graphic designer, and evenings spent with David, often curled up on the sofa, scrolling through our phones, comfortable in the silence that comes after 2 decades, together. My life revolved around the familiar rhythm of school runs, PTA meetings. I was the secretary, naturally. My part-time work as a freelance graphic designer, and evenings spent with David, often curled up on the sofa, scrolling through our phones, comfortable in the silence that comes after 2 decades. We had a close circle of friends, the kind who finished each other's sentences at dinner parties and whose kids had practically grown up together. At the center of that circle was Jessica. Jessica was my best friend, not just a friend, but the friend. We'd met when Lily and her son were in kindergarten, bonding over spilled juice boxes and the shared exhaustion of early motherhood. We'd navigated school politics, teenage angst, and the quiet challenges of long-term marriages side by side. Her partner, Mark, was quieter than David, amiable enough, and we often spent weekends together, barbecuing in backyards that looked remarkably similar. Jessica was vibrant, effortlessly stylish, always pushing me, gently out of my comfort zone. She knew everything about me, or so I thought. My hopes, my small anxieties, the way I felt our marriage had settled into a comfortable, if sometimes predictable, routine. I trusted her implicitly. David was David. Successful in his sales career, a good provider, a decent father, if a little emotionally distant at times. We had a history, a shared life built brick by painstaking brick. We had inside jokes, shared memories, a deep familiarity with each other's habits and moods. I loved him. I believed he loved me. Our life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, solid, or so I believed. The unravelling began on a Tuesday evening in early December. David was in the shower, the sound of water a steady drumbeat through the upstairs floor. His phone lay on the kitchen counter, screen up. I was making tea, my mind already drifting to the dozen small tasks still needing attention before bed. A notification popped up. My eyes, scanning idly, caught the name, Jessica, followed by a message preview that ripped the world from under my feet. Can't stop thinking about last night. You were incredible, Jay. The teacup slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the tile floor. The hot liquid splashed across my bare feet, but I didn't feel the heat. My entire body had gone cold. Incredible? Last night? My mind, in a desperate attempt to make sense of it, tried to conjure innocent explanations. A work thing? An inside joke I didn't know about? But the words, the single initial J at the end, screamed the truth. Jessica, my best friend, thinking about last night. You were incredible, to David. The shower turned off upstairs. The sound of the water stopping was like a switch flicking off the noise in my brain, leaving an unbearable silence filled only with the frantic pounding of my own heart. I stared at the phone, at the broken ceramic and spreading tea on the floor, at my trembling hands. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Not David. Not with Jessica. He came downstairs a few minutes later, dressed in sweats, a towel around his neck. He saw the mess on the floor, saw my face. The colour drained from his own face instantly. He knew. He knew I'd seen it. Sarah? What? He started, his voice hesitant. Don't, I whispered, my voice raw, unrecognisable. Don't you dare. He looked at the phone on the counter, then back at me. His eyes flickered with panic, then resignation. Sarah, I can explain, he said, taking a step towards me. Explain what, David? My voice rose, cracking. Explain can't stop thinking about last night. You were incredible. Jay? I spat the words out, each one laced with venom. Explain that? He stopped, deflated. He didn't deny it. That was the cruelest cut. No denial, no indignant protestation of innocence. Just silence, heavy and damning. It just happened, he mumbled, looking at the floor. Just happened. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up, sharp and painful. 15 years, 12 years married, a daughter, and it just happened? It was a mistake, Sarah, a terrible mistake. A mistake? My voice was a scream now, echoing in the quiet house. With Jessica? My best friend? You made a terrible mistake with my best friend. He finally looked up, his eyes pleading. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Sorry? The word was meaningless. Sorry you got caught, you mean? No, Sarah, please. It wasn't planned. It was just, we were talking. Things got out of hand. Out of hand? I walked towards him, ignoring the broken ceramic underfoot. When? Where? How long? The questions tumbled out, fueled by a blinding rage that was rapidly consuming the shock and pain. He stammered, avoiding my eyes. A few times. Over the last couple of months. Months. Not just last night. Months. My best friend, my husband. A secret life lived right under my nose. The comfortable silence, the shared jokes, the double dates, the PTA meetings, all of it was a lie. A performance. They had looked me in the eye, shared meals with me, while sharing something else entirely behind my back. Get out, I said, my voice suddenly calm, dangerously calm. What? Get out. Now, I can't look at you. Sarah, where would I go? I don't care. Go to Jessica's. I'm sure she'd love to comfort you. The rage flared again, hotter than the spilled tea. He hesitated, then turned and walked towards the stairs. As he passed, I flinched away as if his touch would contaminate me. He paused at the top, looked back, a pathetic figure of guilt and defeat. I just stared, a stone-cold emptiness spreading through me. He left. I heard the garage door open, his car pull out. The silence returned, heavier now, filled with the ghosts of a life that no longer existed. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the mess, the smell of tea, the shattered pieces of ceramic mirroring the state of my heart. My phone rang. Jessica. I stared at the screen, the name that had just destroyed my world. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. The next few days were a blur of pain, anger, and a terrifying numbness. I spoke to David only through text, arranging for him to pick up some clothes while I was out. He stayed at a hotel initially, then presumably crashed with someone else. I didn't ask, didn't care. The thought of him going to Jessica's was unbearable, but also, perversely, felt like the only logical place for him to be. Jessica was relentless. Texts, calls, voicemails, apologies, pleas for understanding, claims that it was a mistake, that she was losing her best friend, that she never meant to hurt me. Each message felt like a fresh assault. I deleted them without reading, blocked her number, blocked her on social media. The digital severing was swift and absolute, a mirror of the emotional one. Lily knew something was terribly wrong. She'd heard the shouting that first night, seen my face, the mess in the kitchen. I tried to play it down at first, a big argument about work, but she wasn't a child anymore. She was 16, intelligent, observant. She saw the tension, the way I flinched when David's name came up, the way I avoided looking at our wedding photos. Eventually, I had to tell her. Sitting her down was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I chose my words carefully, trying to be honest without being overly graphic or placing all the blame solely on her father. I told her that sometimes adults make terrible mistakes that break trust, that her father and Jessica had a relationship, that it wasn't her fault, that we both loved her more than anything, but that her father wouldn't be living with us anymore. Her reaction was quieter than my own explosion, but just as devastating. Tears streamed down her face silently. She asked questions in a small voice. How long, why, did I hate him now? I answered as best I could, emphasizing that hate was a complicated word, that I was hurt and angry, but that he was still her father. I didn't mention the public reckoning I was already beginning to formulate in my mind. Not yet. She didn't need to see that part of me. The rage simmered beneath the surface of my grief. It wasn't enough that they had destroyed my marriage and my closest friendship. They had done it with such casual disregard, such blatant lies. They had lived their secret lives while pretending to be my dearest companions. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep properly. Every corner of the house held a memory, now tainted. The sofa where we watched movies, the kitchen where we had morning coffee, the bedroom, especially the bedroom. My initial thoughts of revenge were messy, impulsive. Slash his tires, key Jessica's car, but those were fleeting, unsatisfying. I wanted something that would hit them where it hurt most, not physically, but socially. In Oakwood, reputation was everything. Appearances were paramount. David and Jessica were well-liked, respected members of the community. David on the school board, Jessica on the garden club committee. They had built lives based on being seen as good, decent people. I wanted to shatter that image. I wanted everyone to know, not out of petty gossip, but out of a desperate need for justice, for validation of my pain. They had wronged me publicly, in essence, by pretending everything was normal while betraying me within our shared social space. My revenge needed to be equally public. I started paying attention to the local social calendar. David's company holiday party was coming up. Then the annual Oakwood Charity Gala, usually a glittering affair attended by most of the town's prominent families. Jessica would be there. David would be there. It was perfect. It was a stage. A cold clarity settled over me, replacing some of the raw pain. This wasn't just about hurting them back. It was about reclaiming my narrative. They had controlled the secret. Now I would control the revelation. I began gathering my evidence, the screenshot of the message. Dates and times I could piece together from David's calendar and Jessica's casual mentions of where she'd been. Nothing concrete enough for a court of law, perhaps, but more than enough to plant the seed of undeniable truth in the fertile ground of suburban gossip. I felt a shift within me. The passive, comfortable Sarah was receding, replaced by someone sharper, colder, fueled by a righteous anger. It was a terrifying transformation, but also perversely empowering. I was no longer just the victim. I was an agent. I was planning. I confided in one person. My cousin, who lived in a different state, far removed from Oakwood's social circles. She listened, horrified, but she didn't judge. She just offered quiet support and a place to stay if I needed to escape. Talking it through with her, articulating my plan, solidified my resolve. This wasn't just a whim. It was a necessity. For my own sanity, I needed to expose the lie. I needed to watch their carefully constructed world crumble, just as mine had. The days crawled by, each one a test of my composure. I went through the motions for Lily, for work. Inside, I was a coiled spring, waiting for the right moment to strike. I practiced keeping a neutral expression, a calm voice. I researched divorce lawyers, starting the practical steps even as I planned the emotional and social detonation. The contrast between the mundane reality of dividing assets and the dramatic fantasy of public exposure was stark, almost absurd. But both were necessary steps in dismantling the old life and clearing the ground for whatever came next. I wasn't sure what came next. All I knew was that David and Jessica couldn't be allowed to continue their lives, their reputations intact, while mine lay in ruins. The reckoning was coming. The Oakwood Charity Gala was held in the grand ballroom of the old downtown hotel, a place usually reserved for weddings and significant anniversaries. It was a night of glittering dresses, rented tuxedos, and forced smiles, the perfect backdrop for a carefully orchestrated reveal. David was a co-chair this year, meaning he'd be front and center. Jessica, a regular attendee, would likely be there with Mark, circulating among their usual crowd. I arrived alone. I wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated. No flashy jewelry, nothing to distract. I wanted the focus to be solely on the message. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, but outwardly I was composed. I moved through the reception area, nodding politely, accepting sympathetic glances from those who had heard whispers of David and I separating, but knew nothing of the why. The air hummed with polite conversation, the clinking of glasses, the soft strains of a jazz trio. It was the sound of normalcy, a normalcy I was about to shatter. I spotted David across the room, talking to the hotel manager, a practiced smile on his face. He looked confident, in control. The sight of him looking so at ease after what he'd done sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. Then I saw Jessica. She was near the bar, laughing, her head thrown back, looking radiant in a shimmering gown. Mark was beside her, a bland smile on his face. They looked like any other happy couple, enjoying a night out. The sheer audacity of it, their ability to project this image while carrying the weight of their betrayal, was breathtaking. My path was clear. I needed to get to the microphone on the small stage where announcements were made later in the evening. It was a bold move, maybe a foolish one, but it was the only way to ensure everyone heard at the same time. No whispers, no filtered gossip. Just the raw truth, delivered directly. I mingled for a bit, making small talk, my eyes scanning the room, noting who was there. The mayor, the head of the Historical Society, several prominent business owners, parents from Lily's school. The audience was assembled. As the dinner service began, people started moving towards their tables. There was a brief lull as the jazz trio finished their set and the event organizer stepped up to the microphone to welcome everyone. This was my chance. With a deep breath that felt like swallowing glass, I made my way towards the stage. I moved purposefully, but without drawing undue attention until I was close. The organizer, a woman I knew casually from the PTA, smiled at me, surprised. "Sarah, is everything all right?" she murmured, leaning away from the microphone. I smiled back, a tight, brittle smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Yes, thank you," I said, my voice steady. "I just have a small, impromptu announcement to make. It's rather important." Before she could object, or perhaps too stunned to do so, I stepped past her and took the microphone. The room was still settling, a low murmur of conversation filling the space. All eyes weren't on me yet. I tapped the microphone lightly. The sound echoed through the ballroom. A few heads turned. I cleared my throat, my gaze sweeping across the room. I found David's table. He was looking at me, his smile frozen, a look of dawning horror spreading across his face as he realized what I was doing. Jessica was beside him, her laughter dying on her lips, her eyes widening in sudden panic. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice amplified, carrying clearly to every corner of the room. It was stronger than I expected, laced with a cold authority I didn't know I possessed. The murmuring faded. Hundreds of faces turned towards the stage. "Thank you all for being here tonight to support the Oakwood Children's Library," I continued, using the event's purpose to lend a veneer of normalcy before the storm. It's a wonderful cause, and community support is so important. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. My hands were clasped tightly around the microphone stand, the metal cold beneath my trembling fingers. "Speaking of community and trust," I said, my tone shifting, becoming sharper, cutting through the polite atmosphere. "I wanted to share a personal story tonight, one that involves trust and betrayal." A ripple went through the crowd. People exchanged uneasy glances. David was half out of his seat, his face ashen. Jessica was shrinking back in her chair. "For many years," I continued, my gaze fixed somewhere over their heads, projecting my voice to the back of the room, "I believed I had a strong marriage, a loving husband, a best friend I could rely on through thick and thin." I paused again, letting the irony sting. It turns out I was mistaken on both counts. I took a deep breath. My husband, David, has been having an affair. Not just any affair, an affair with my best friend, Jessica. A collective gasp swept through the room. Whispers erupted instantly, louder than the jazz trio had been. Eyes darted from me to David, then to Jessica, who now had both hands clamped over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror and shame. Mark looked stunned, staring at his partner as if seeing her for the first time. "They have been seeing each other for months," I stated, my voice unwavering despite the chaos I was unleashing. "While sharing meals at our table, while attending events like this together, while I believed we were all simply friends, building lives side by side, they were building a secret life together. A life built on lies and deception." I reached into the small clutch I carried and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the printed screenshot of Jessica's message. "For anyone who doubts," I said, holding it up, though no one could read the words from a distance, "this is a message from Jessica to David, received on my husband's phone. Can't stop thinking about last night. You were incredible. Jay." The murmuring intensified, turning into an undeniable roar of shock and scandal. People were openly staring, pointing. David was on his feet now, his face a mask of horror and fury, not at Jessica, but at me. Jessica was sobbing, burying her face in her hands. Mark was looking around wildly, perhaps wanting to escape. "I wanted you all to know," I concluded, my voice finally beginning to tremble slightly, but my resolve firm. "Because their actions didn't just impact me. They impacted our community. They built their lies within this very social circle. And I believe that honesty, however painful, is the only way to move forward." I placed the screenshot back in my clutch. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, a final, icy dismissal. I stepped away from the microphone, leaving the stunned organizer frozen beside it. The room was a tableau of shock and confusion. I didn't look at David or Jessica again. I simply walked off the stage, through the stunned crowd, my head held high, ignoring the whispers and the stares that followed me. I walked out of the ballroom, out of the hotel, and into the cold December night, leaving the wreckage of their reputations behind me. It was done. The fallout from the Oakwood Charity Gala was immediate and brutal. My reckoning, as I privately called it, ripped through the town like a wildfire. The carefully maintained facade of suburban respectability cracked wide open. Gossip spread like a virus, carried on the winds of phone calls, emails, and social media posts. Everyone had an opinion. Some were sympathetic to me, horrified by the betrayal. Others, perhaps those who valued appearances above all else, were uncomfortable, even critical, of my public display, viewing it as vindictive or making a scene. But no one could ignore it. David and Jessica were instantly radioactive. David was quietly asked to step down from the school board. Jessica resigned from the garden club. Their social invitations dried up. Their friends, caught in the crossfire, had to choose sides, and many chose to distance themselves from the scandal entirely. Mark, Jessica's partner, reportedly moved out within days. Their relationship, built on a foundation that included complicity in betraying their friends, didn't survive the public exposure. I felt a complex mix of emotions in the aftermath. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing them face consequences, in knowing that their secret was out and their carefully constructed lives had been disrupted. But it wasn't the triumphant feeling I might have expected. It was tinged with emptiness, with the lingering pain of the original wound. The revenge hadn't erased the hurt, it had just added another layer of complexity to it. I had burned down their world, but some of the embers had landed on me too. The whispers about my scene were hard to ignore, making me feel exposed and vulnerable, even as I felt justified. Lily's reaction to the public spectacle was perhaps the most difficult. She was mortified. "Mom, how could you?" she'd cried, tears streaming down her face. "Everyone's talking about it. It's so embarrassing." She was angry, not just at David and Jessica for the original betrayal, but at me for the way I had chosen to reveal it. She saw the spectacle, the public shame, and it reflected onto her. It was a harsh reminder that my actions had consequences beyond just the three of us. I had wanted justice, but I had also inflicted pain, even on my daughter, by making our private tragedy a public drama. It was a heavy realization, one that added to the weight of my own actions. The divorce proceedings, fueled by the public scandal, were bitter. David was furious about the public exposure, accusing me of ruining his reputation. I, in turn, used his infidelity and the public fallout as leverage. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Eleanor, who understood exactly what I had done and why, guided me through it. I didn't want hall passes or sexual concessions. My revenge was already complete in that regard. I wanted tangible security, a clear break and an acknowledgement of fault. I demanded the family home, a larger share of the assets, and specific terms related to David's professional connections that had been damaged by the scandal, essentially ensuring he bore the financial brunt of his actions and the subsequent fallout. He fought initially, but the weight of the evidence, both the affair itself and the now public knowledge of it, and the social pressure were too much. He eventually agreed to my terms. The divorce was finalized 6 months after D-Day, in the summer of 2021. Signing the papers felt anticlimactic after the preceding months of emotional warfare and public drama. It was just a stack of papers, formalizing the end of a life I had believed was permanent. I stayed in the family home initially, but it felt haunted. Every room held memories, now distorted and painful. It didn't feel like my home anymore, but the site of a demolition. I needed a fresh start, a physical space that was mine and mine alone, built on my terms. I found a smaller house across town, a charming bungalow with a little garden. It wasn't the spacious family home, but it felt like a sanctuary. Moving in, painting the walls, arranging the furniture, it was a process of reclaiming my space, and in turn reclaiming myself. It was smaller, yes, but it felt entirely mine. Navigating 50-50 custody with Lily was challenging at first. Drop-offs and pick-ups were awkward, filled with strained politeness. David and I communicated primarily about Lily's schedule, school events and needs. The raw anger slowly subsided, replaced by a weary tolerance. We were bound together by our daughter, and for her sake, we had to find a way to coexist, however separate our lives had become. Lily adjusted, splitting her time between two homes. She seemed relieved that the open conflict had ended, even if the underlying tension remained. She still found the entire situation weird, a word she used frequently to describe the shattered pieces of our family life. Jessica and Mark didn't last. The public exposure, combined with the original betrayal and Mark's own feelings of being deceived or made a fool of, proved fatal to their relationship. Jessica reportedly struggled in the aftermath, facing social isolation and the loss of her closest friend group. I didn't gloat, but I wasn't sympathetic either. She had made her choices. I heard snippets of gossip about her attempting to move to another town, but I didn't follow up. My focus was on rebuilding my own life, far away from the wreckage of that friendship. Current part characters, 3,994. Total characters, 15,963. The years that followed were a period of quiet rebuilding. The dust settled in Oakwood, though the scandal remained a part of our shared history, a cautionary tale whispered over coffee. I focused on my work, expanding my freelance graphic design business. It gave me a sense of purpose and independence. I reconnected with friends who had stood by me, and cautiously made new ones, careful about who I let into my inner circle. Trust was a fragile thing now, easily broken. I dated. It was strange at first, stepping back into the world after being off the market for 2 decades. Online profiles, awkward first dates, the careful dance of getting to know someone new while carrying the heavy baggage of my past. I wasn't looking for a replacement for David, or for the life I'd lost. I was looking for connection, for companionship, perhaps for a glimpse of a different kind of future. I met Ben about a year after the divorce was final. He was a kind, stable man I met through a mutual acquaintance. He was recently divorced himself, understood some of the landscape of broken trusts, though his story was less dramatic than mine. Ben was everything David wasn't during those final years. Attentive, emotionally available, genuinely interested in my day, my thoughts, my feelings. He was a safe harbor after the storm. We dated for nearly 2 years. It was a healthy, steady relationship. We went for hikes in the state parks nearby, tried new restaurants in downtown Oakwood, spent quiet evenings at each other's places. Lily liked him well enough. He was kind to her, respected her space. He was a good man, and I genuinely cared for him. For a while I thought this might be it, a quiet, peaceful second chapter. But something was missing. As the initial comfort and stability settled in, I started to feel restless. Ben was wonderful, but he didn't challenge me. He didn't understand the depth of the trauma I had experienced, the way it had fundamentally altered my perspective on relationships, on trust, on myself. He saw the surface, the strong, independent woman who had survived a difficult divorce. He didn't see the scars, the lingering questions, the part of me that felt irrevocably changed. I found myself holding back, unable to fully articulate the complexity of my internal landscape. I realized I was trying to fit myself back into a conventional box, a nice, safe, monogamous box, and it no longer felt like home. Our conversations felt surface level compared to the intense, painful, but ultimately transformative experiences I had lived through. Ben represented a return to normalcy, but I wasn't sure I wanted normalcy anymore. The fire that had fueled my revenge, the subsequent process of rebuilding from scratch, had changed me. I was more aware of the unspoken, the hidden, the potential for things to be wildly different from how they appeared. A conventional, stable relationship suddenly felt insufficient. Not because Ben wasn't enough, but because I had outgrown the container of that kind of relationship. Ending things with Ben was difficult because he had done nothing wrong. He was hurt and confused. I tried to explain, stumbling over words about needing to figure myself out, about the past still having a hold on me in ways I didn't understand. It wasn't fair to him, and I felt guilty for hurting a good person. But I knew I couldn't stay. I needed to face the lingering questions about my own capacity for trust, for intimacy, for a relationship that could encompass the entirety of who I had become. During this time, my interactions with David had become manageable. We still co-parented Lily, attending her school events, coordinating schedules. The bitter resentment had faded, replaced by a sort of distant, pragmatic respect born of shared history and a mutual commitment to our daughter. We could be in the same room without radiating hostility. We could have brief, civil conversations. It wasn't friendship, not by a long shot, but it was a fragile truce. Lily was thriving. She was a senior in high school now, navigating college applications, excited about her future. She was resilient, adapting to the two-household life. She still occasionally made comments about the weirdness of it all, but she had found her footing. Seeing her happy, successful, and well-adjusted was the greatest comfort and the strongest affirmation that we, her parents, had managed to do at least one thing right amidst the chaos. As Lily's graduation approached, I found myself thinking about David more than usual, not with anger or longing, but with a strange sense of shared experience. We had both been through the fire, albeit on different sides. We had both lost something fundamental and had to rebuild. We were forever linked by Lily and by the spectacular implosion of our life together. The upcoming graduation felt like a milestone, not just for Lily, but for us too. A moment where the past, present, and future would intersect, whether we were ready for it or not. Lily's high school graduation was held in the Oakwood High Auditorium, a cavernous space filled with proud parents, restless siblings, and the nervous energy of graduating seniors. David and I arrived separately, but had agreed to sit together in the designated Parent of Graduate section for Lily's sake. It felt like stepping onto a stage again, albeit a different kind than the gala 4 years prior. We found our seats next to each other. There was an initial awkwardness, a palpable tension in the air between us. We exchanged polite nods, mumbled hellos. The air conditioning hummed, the crowd buzzed, the band played slightly off-key processional music. It was surreal, sitting there side by side after everything. The betrayal, the rage, the public reckoning, the bitter divorce, the years apart, the separate lives we had built. All of it was crammed into the small space between our chairs. As the ceremony began, the focus shifted to the stream of students walking across the stage to receive their diplomas. We clapped for the valedictorian, shifted in our seats, endured the lengthy speeches about future endeavors, and seizing the day. Our conversation was limited to quiet comments about the heat, the length of the ceremony, and pointing out Lily's friends as they walked across the stage. Then it was Lily's turn. Her name was called. She walked across the stage, beaming, accepted her diploma, shook hands, and posed for a quick photo. David and I both instinctively leaned forward, fumbling for our phones to take pictures. In that moment, there was no betrayal, no divorce, no years of separation. There was just pride. Pride in our daughter, this amazing young woman we had somehow managed to raise together despite everything. When she walked off the stage, she glanced towards us, saw us sitting together, and gave a small, hesitant wave. We waved back, smiling. It was a shared moment, a silent acknowledgement of the one thing that still bound us, the one thing that mattered more than our own broken history. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the gymnasium. We navigated the crowd, congratulating Lily, taking photos. We stood together for a few pictures with her, the three of us a fractured unit, but a unit nonetheless. The awkwardness was still there, but it was softened by the celebratory atmosphere and the focus on Lily. Later, as Lily was off with her friends, taking selfies and signing yearbooks, David and I found ourselves standing near the edge of the gym, away from the main throng. The noise of the crowd was a low roar. "She did great," David said, looking towards Lily, a genuine smile on his face. "She did," I agreed, the pride still swelling in my chest. We did okay, didn't we? With her, I mean." He turned to look at me, the smile fading slightly, replaced by a look I couldn't quite read. Reflection? Regret? "Yeah," he said softly. "We did okay, maybe the only thing we did okay." The silence stretched for a moment, not awkward this time, but heavy with unspoken history. "It's been a long 4 years, Sarah," he said, his voice low. "It has," I replied, meeting his gaze. His eyes looked older, maybe a little sadder than I remembered. He wasn't the confident, slightly arrogant man who had betrayed me. Life had clearly left its marks on him too. I messed up," he said, the words quiet, almost lost in the noise. "Spectacularly." It wasn't a full apology, not for everything, but it was an acknowledgement that felt more genuine than the desperate pleas for forgiveness he'd offered years ago. Yes, you did, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the old anger. The anger was still there, buried deep, but it wasn't the first thing that surfaced anymore. He looked away towards Lily. I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you. Not after everything. He paused, then turned back. But seeing you here tonight, seeing us here for her, it makes you think. Think what? I prompted, curious despite myself. That maybe there's more to the story than just the ending, he said, searching for the words. We built something, Sarah, a life, and yeah, I destroyed it, but is that all it was? Just destruction? I didn't answer immediately. Was it just destruction? For years that's how I had seen it. The end. The final chapter. But sitting here, watching our daughter, talking to the man who had caused me so much pain, I felt a confusing mix of emotions. The hurt was still there, a dull ache rather than a sharp stab. The anger was dormant, and in its place was something else. A recognition of shared history, of mutual failure. My revenge hadn't been my finest moment either, a fact Lily's reaction had hammered home, and a strange, unexpected sense of connection that transcended the betrayal. I don't know, David, I said honestly. I really don't know. He nodded slowly. Me neither. He hesitated, then took a small step closer. Could we maybe talk sometime? Not about the past, not necessarily, but about now? About whatever this is? He gestured vaguely between us, between the life we'd had and the separate lives we lived. The idea was terrifying, and to my utter surprise, not entirely unwelcome. Years of therapy, of rebuilding, had brought me to a place where the thought of engaging with him didn't immediately send me spiraling into rage. It felt possible, different. Maybe, I said, the word tentative hanging in the air. Maybe we could. The conversation at Lily's graduation lingered in my mind for days. It was a small crack in the wall that had stood between David and me for 4 years, a tentative bridge across the chasm of betrayal and divorce. The thought of talking to him, really talking, felt both daunting and strangely compelling. It wasn't about wanting him back, not the David who had cheated or the marriage we had. It was about the possibility of understanding, perhaps, or of finding a different way to relate to the person who was inextricably linked to me through our daughter and our shared painful history. A week after graduation, I surprised myself by picking up the phone and calling him. My hand trembled slightly as I dialed the number I still knew by heart. He answered on the second ring, his voice a little surprised. Sarah? Hi, David. It's Sarah. A pause. I was thinking about what you said at graduation, about talking. Oh, yeah, I was hoping you might call. His voice sounded hopeful, cautious. Me too, I guess. I took a deep breath. Look, I don't know what this is or what it could be, but if we were going to talk, really talk, I think it would need to be with someone else present, somewhere neutral. He was silent for a moment. Are you talking about counselling? Yes, I said. I am, but not marriage counselling to fix the old marriage. That's gone, beyond repair. I'm talking about counselling to see if there's anything new here, anything worth exploring. Exploring? Yeah. This was the terrifying part. The unconventional idea that had been forming in my mind as I navigated my post-divorce life and reflected on the failures of our traditional structure. I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past few years about why our marriage failed, about what I thought I wanted versus what I might actually need. And I think if there's any possibility of us having a relationship again, any kind of relationship, it would need to be built on something completely different than what we had. What do you mean, different? I mean, I don't think I can ever go back to traditional monogamy with you, I said, the words coming out faster now. Too much trust was broken. Too much happened. But maybe there are other ways to have a relationship. Ways that are more honest about desires, about needs, about acknowledging that one person might not be able to fulfill everything for another person. Ways that are built on radical honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. He was quiet on the other end of the line. I imagined his surprise, his confusion. This wasn't the conversation he'd probably expected. Are you talking about an open relationship, he asked, his voice hesitant, almost disbelieving. Maybe, I said, or something like it, something non-monogamous, ethically non-monogamous. But it's not just about sex, David. It's about honesty, about communication, about building a connection that acknowledges the complexities and imperfections of people and relationships after everything that's happened. I don't know if it's possible for us. I don't know if I even want a relationship with you, ultimately. But I'm willing to sit down with a professional and explore the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could build something entirely new from the ground up. Something that looks nothing like the marriage we had and nothing like the conventional relationships we tried to build afterward. He was silent for a long time. I braced myself for rejection, for him to say I was crazy, that this was a ridiculous idea. Finally he spoke. I don't understand it. Not really. It's a lot to take in. I know, I said softly. It is. But you're willing to try? I'm willing to explore it, I clarified. With a counsellor who specialises in this kind of thing, to see if it's even feasible for us, if we can even have the kind of honest conversations it would require. Another pause. Okay, he said. Okay, Sarah, I'll do that. I'll go to counselling with you, to explore it. A wave of relief mixed with sheer terror washed over me. Okay, I replied. Okay. We ended the call, agreeing to look into counsellors who specialised in E&M or alternative relationship structures. The conversation had been draining, exposing a vulnerability I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. But it also felt like a step forward, into unknown territory, but at least it was motion. Finding the right counsellor took a few weeks. We settled on Dr. Ramirez, a woman whose online profile mentioned experience working with couples exploring non-traditional relationship models, including navigating complex histories and rebuilding trust. Our first session was scheduled for a Thursday evening. Walking into the counselling office felt surreal. It was a comfortable, neutral space, soft chairs, calming colours, a box of tissues on the coffee table. David was already there, looking nervous. We sat in separate chairs, the physical distance between us a stark reminder of the emotional and historical distance we needed to cross. Dr. Ramirez was warm and perceptive. She listened patiently as we each, haltingly at first, recounted our version of events. The affair, the discovery, my reckoning, the divorce, the years apart, our individual journeys, and now this unexpected moment at Lily's graduation that had led us here. We talked about the pain, the anger, the loss of trust. David expressed remorse, a deeper, quieter kind than before, acknowledging the devastation he had caused. I spoke about the depth of the betrayal, the transformation I had undergone, the difficulty of trusting again, and the feeling that traditional relationship structures no longer fit. Then we began to talk about the possibility of E&M, not as a solution to our problems, but as a potential framework for a new relationship, if one could even exist. Dr. Ramirez explained that ethical non-monogamy required radical honesty, clear communication, and strong boundaries, qualities that were incredibly challenging to build, especially on a foundation of broken trust. It wasn't a free-for-all. It was a structured approach to allowing for connections outside the primary partnership, with the full knowledge and consent of everyone involved. The idea of discussing potential future partners with David, the man I had divorced for cheating, was mind-boggling, terrifying, and strangely held a sliver of potential for a different kind of intimacy, one built on transparency rather than assumption. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out at a vast, uncharted landscape. Lily's reaction when we cautiously told her we were going to counselling and exploring the possibility of building a new relationship was exactly as I had anticipated. "Seriously," she said, her eyes wide. "After everything? You guys are going to get back together?" "Not exactly back together, sweetie," I tried to explain. "We're just talking with a counsellor, trying to see if there's a way for us to have a different kind of relationship, maybe." "A different kind," she echoed, clearly confused. David stepped in. "We're trying to figure out what works for us now, Lily, after all this time. It's complicated." She looked from me to him, then back again. "Complicated is an understatement," she muttered. She paused, then fixed us both with a look that was half exasperation, half genuine discomfort. "Look, I don't even know if I'm happy or concerned about this. It's just weird. Really weird." She took a deep breath. "But whatever you guys do, please, for the love of God, do not tell me any details of any kind. Ever. Okay?" We both readily agreed. Her boundaries were clear and completely understandable. She had been through enough. It's been 6 months since that first counselling session. 6 months of difficult, often painful, but surprisingly productive conversations. We still meet with Dr. Ramirez weekly. We've talked about the affair, the motivations, the impact on both of us. We've talked about my revenge and the consequences it had, even on Lily. We've talked about the years apart, the lessons learned, the ways we've changed. And we've talked extensively about the concept of E&M, what it means, what it requires, whether we believe it's a viable path for us, given our history. It's not a magic fix. The trust is still fragile, a delicate structure we are trying to reinforce with brutal honesty and consistent communication. There are moments of doubt, of fear, of old hurts resurfacing. Discussing the possibility of having connections with other people, even in a theoretical sense right now, is incredibly challenging, especially given that the original betrayal involved someone else. It requires confronting deeply ingrained societal norms about relationships and facing our own insecurities head-on. But there are also moments that feel hopeful, moments when we are truly present with each other in the counselling room, talking about our needs and desires with a level of honesty we never achieved in our 2 decades of marriage. Moments when we see glimpses of the people we were and the people we have become, and wonder if those 2 versions can somehow coexist in a new framework. We haven't defined the relationship yet. We haven't jumped into anything. The counselling is focused on building the foundation. The communication skills, the trust, the understanding of what an ethical, non-monogamous relationship truly entails beyond just permitting sex with others. It's about establishing boundaries, discussing jealousy, and ensuring that the primary partnership, if we even decide to have one again, remains the priority. We've started talking, tentatively, about the possibility of me moving back into the original family home. It's a huge step, laden with symbolism and practical complexities. Lily is away at college now, but her room is still there. It feels like acknowledging our shared past while trying to build a shared future that looks nothing like that past. It's not a decision we've made lightly, and it's tied directly to the progress we make in counselling. Jessica and Mark never reconciled. Jessica reportedly moved out of state after the social fallout died down. I haven't seen or spoken to her since the gala. The friendship, the betrayal, the public spectacle, it all feels like a lifetime ago, a painful chapter that is definitively closed. David occasionally hears snippets about Mike, the original Mike from the story I based this on, his counterpart in that world, through old college connections, still single, still navigating life. Emily, Jessica's counterpart, reportedly remarried quickly after her divorce from Eric, Mark's counterpart, and is doing well. The ripple effects of that original betrayal within the friend group were far-reaching, scattering people to different states and different lives. Lily is finding college life exciting. She still thinks the idea of her parents potentially reconciling, especially in some kind of non-monogamous arrangement, is weird. She calls us regularly, shares updates about her classes and friends, and pointedly avoids asking about our counselling sessions or our living situation. Her boundary is firm, and we respect it. She just wants us to be reasonably happy and stable, whatever that looks like, as long as she doesn't have to hear about the details. Where does this story end? I don't know. It's not over. There's no neat resolution, no guarantee of a happy ending. We are 2 people, scarred by betrayal and divorce, tentatively exploring a path that is unconventional and fraught with challenges. We are trying to build something new from the ashes of the old, using radical honesty and open communication as our tools. It might work or it might not. But for the first time in a long time, it feels like we are actively choosing our path, rather than being swept along by the currents of anger and resentment. It's a story about infidelity, yes, and revenge and divorce. But maybe, just maybe, it's also a story about the messy, complicated, and sometimes surprising ways people try to heal, to reconnect, and to redefine what a relationship can be, even after everything has fallen apart. The comfortable suburban life I knew is gone forever. But perhaps, just perhaps, something real and honest can grow in its place. Only time, and a lot more difficult conversations in Dr. Ramirez's office, will tell.